In 1600, London merchants pooled their money and formed a company. They had a tiny starting capital, no standing army, and zero political power. 150 years later, that exact same corporate entity ran the largest private military on Earth, collecting taxes from 200 million people. We are accustomed to nation-states and empires absorbing territory, but this was a publicly traded enterprise, bound by a strict mandate to deliver regular returns to shareholders. To understand the sheer absurdity of this, look at what they were walking into. In 1600, the Mughal Empire generated roughly 25% of global GDP. That is more wealth than all of Europe combined. The trade dynamic was entirely one-sided. European manufacturers could not produce anything the Mughal court wanted. India, however, produced the high-margin silk, cotton, and spices that London merchants desperately needed to sell. The East India Company had absolutely no capacity to take these resources by force. They arrived in Asia as beggars, asking for permission to set up a few coastal warehouses. For the first half-century, they stayed in their lane. The operation consisted of diplomatic gifts, basic negotiations, and running small, harmless trading posts. But moving expensive goods in the 17th century was dangerous, and isolated warehouses were obvious targets for theft. To protect their inventory, the company petitioned local rulers to hire a few armed guards. Once you have guards, you need a garrison to house them. A garrison requires stronger walls, which quickly evolve into stone fortifications. The board of directors back in London never drafted a mandate for military expansion. Every single structural addition was recorded in the ledgers as a rational, localized business expense, meant to secure a volatile supply chain. That escalating security budget peaked in 1757, when roughly 3,000 company men marched out to face the Nawab of Bengal's army of 50,000. By any conventional military calculation, the company's forces should have been wiped off the map. The commanding officer, Robert Clive, bypassed tactical combat entirely. Before a single shot was fired, he bribed the opposing general to keep his troops on the sidelines. The massive Bengali army collapsed from the inside out. In a single afternoon, a trading company acquired total control over Bengal, the wealthiest province on the subcontinent. Controlling Bengal gave the company direct access to the region's massive tax revenues. Their business model abruptly pivoted from buying and selling goods to extracting local wealth. They fed those new tax revenues into a very specific loop. They took the extracted money and used it to hire a massive private military, made up largely of locally recruited Indian soldiers. They then deployed that newly funded army to march on the neighboring province. Capturing the next territory provided a fresh tax base, which funded more soldiers to take the next territory and repeat. Managing this expanding footprint forced the company to take on the daily functions of a state. They established court systems, drafted local laws, and, as this 1808 copper coin demonstrates, began minting their own currency. The executives had engineered a completely self-sustaining engine. Indian tax money was directly funding the military conquest of India, all while the parent organization remained happily listed on the London Stock Exchange. When a traditional government fails its people, there is usually some mechanism of political friction. But when the entity holding absolute sovereign power is legally required to optimize strictly for corporate profit, the priorities change. In 1770, a severe drought hit Bengal, triggering a catastrophic famine. Historians estimate that anywhere from 1 to 10 million people starved to death. The company did not suspend collections or offer systemic relief. Because agricultural output had dropped, they aggressively increased land taxes in surviving areas to ensure they met their regional revenue targets. As up to a third of the local population perished, the accounting math held up perfectly. That year, the East India Company successfully paid out its regular financial dividend to its shareholders in London. This extractive loop ran for 257 years. It finally broke in 1857, when the central mechanism of the machine, the massive army of hired Indian soldiers, mutinied against their employers. The resulting rebellion tore across the subcontinent and proved to London that the commercial entity had grown entirely unmanageable. The British Crown stepped in, permanently dissolved the company, and nationalized every single one of its assets. Authority doesn't require a political state or an invading army to take root. When a purely profit-driven algorithm is handed the coercive tools of a government, with zero accountability to the people it governs, total conquest is not a choice, it is a mathematical inevitability.